Well, this episode was hard to watch. Not because the episode itself was bad or poorly done or anything like that. The reason it was hard to watch is because it was just so heavy. Like, the closest thing I can compare this episode to is the movie Split. Particularly the end of that movie, when we learn why James McAvoy has all these different personalities, and he learns because his mother abused him. And that's very similar to what this episode revealed. The reason that Steven has the Mark personality is because he created him as a way to deal with his abusive mother. And the reason his mother is so abusive is because Steve had a brother who drowned, and his mother blames him for it because he didn't protect him. So she takes all her pain and grief of losing her child out on him and beats him. Lovely stuff. This show went in a very dark direction, and I don't mean dark like horror dark, like The Mummy or anything like that, like the other episodes were. I don't mean like supernatural type dark. I mean hard to watch because it was so heavy. That being said, I enjoyed seeing Steve and Mark bond with each other. Each of them has skeletons in their closet that they need to let go of, and both of their stories were interesting. Apart from like almost the end of the episode, there wasn't a lot of action. This was more of a character study episode, and it was very interesting. We heard about Steve being a mercenary a couple episodes ago, but now we actually get to kind of see that. Steve was a mercenary who was forced to kill a bunch of people he didn't want to kill, and he regretted it. And, Khonshu felt his remorse and spoke to him and, made him swear this oath that if he kills people, it's only going to be for the greater good. He's only going to kill the bad people who deserve it, and that's why he chose me. We actually get to see that in this episode, which was great. And, there was a lot of backstory for both Steven and Mark, for both personalities to unpack in this episode. But I was so intrigued with every second of it, even if at certain points it did get a bit heavy. This show continues to really go outside the comfort zone of the MCU. Like, WandaVision also had themes of, like, grief and stuff like that, but it was never portrayed as dark of a way as this show does. When you watch it, you wouldn't typically think of this as something that goes on in the MCU. It's definitely going outside the comfort zone and dealing with very, very heavy subject matter. For a DC show, maybe, but certainly not for the MCU. So I'm glad that they're really stepping outside their comfort zone and really doing something different with this. And again, I brought up a few weeks ago, another issue some people have with a lot of the MCU is the humor. And with this episode, I can only remember, like, one joke the whole episode, and it was when Steve calls Harrow Ned Flanders, and that's it. That's the only joke in this episode. So good on the writers for realizing, hey, this episode is going to deal with some very serious, very tragic, very dark subject matter. So let's not cheapen it by making jokes at inappropriate times, even if it's to lessen the tension. Good on them for keeping this episode serious and not cheapening it. Letting the audience really feel the emotion, letting them really get shocked, letting them really connect with and feel for these characters. It was a really well done episode. It was a really well done character study. It was very well written. There's only one episode left of the show next week, and I'm very excited to see how this show ends. There's certainly a lot that needs to be wrapped up. I'm very excited to see how it ends.